Have you ever noticed that the harder you chase something, the farther it seems to slip from your grasp? Maybe it's that career goal you've been pushing for, the perfect relationship, or even a sense of peace you can never quite attain. No matter how hard you try, it just seems to stay just out of reach, like trying to catch the wind in your hands. This paradox, the more you chase, the further away it gets, is one of life's most intriguing truths. It's something we all experience at one point or another. The more we obsess over results, the more elusive they seem to become. It's like the universe is playing a game with us, saying, "You can't force it." But what if the secret to success isn't in chasing harder? What if the key to achieving everything we want lies not in gripping, but in releasing? What if, instead of forcing outcomes, we could simply surrender to the process and allow life to unfold naturally? In Zen and Buddhist teachings, we are told that attachment to results can block our very path to success. It's like holding on too tightly to a rope. The more we cling, the more it slips from our hands. But when we let go, something incredible happens. We create space for the universe to work its magic. Before we dive deeper, if you're new here and want to explore more life-changing insights like this, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. You don't want to miss out on more content that can help bring peace, clarity, and balance into your life. Today, we're going to explore how letting go, releasing our expectations, and surrendering to the moment can actually bring us the results we desire, effortlessly. Long ago, nestled in a serene forest surrounded by towering cliffs, there was a young monk named Jinpa. From the moment he entered the monastery, he had devoted himself entirely to the pursuit of enlightenment. Every day, he woke before dawn and meditated in silence, striving to clear his mind of distractions. He read countless scriptures, followed the teachings of his elders, and applied himself with unwavering discipline. Yet, despite his dedication, the peace he so deeply sought remained frustratingly out of reach. His efforts seemed futile. His mind would race with thoughts about his responsibilities, about the future, about his growing frustration. Each day, he set out to empty his mind, but the harder he tried, the more thoughts seemed to flood in. No matter how still his body became, his mind refused to cooperate. He could feel his desire for peace becoming more intense. But ironically, the more he clung to that desire, the further it slipped away. Jinpa would often meditate for hours, focusing intently on his breath, trying to suppress the stream of thoughts that kept invading his stillness. But no matter how much effort he put in, his mind felt like a storm, tossing and turning with no end in sight. In the quiet of his practice, he began to sense a growing frustration, as if the stillness he sought was mocking him. The more he forced his mind to be calm, the more it resisted. The harder he tried to reach peace, the farther it seemed to slip from his grasp. In moments of reflection, Jinpa would ask himself why peace was so difficult to attain. He had seen others, monks and travelers alike, who appeared to be at ease, their minds steady, their hearts calm. They would sit in meditation and remain serene for hours, as if peace came to them effortlessly. Jinpa could not fathom how they managed it. Why? He wondered. Was peace so elusive for him? One afternoon, as he meditated by a beautiful waterfall deep in the heart of the forest, something unexpected caught his attention. The water flowed over the rocks, cascading down toward the river below with an almost graceful fluidity. The water didn't seem to fight against the current. It didn't struggle to move or try to control its course. It simply surrendered to the pull of gravity, flowing smoothly and effortlessly, in harmony with nature. Jinpa observed the water for a long time, his mind momentarily still. The ease with which it flowed struck him deeply. There was no tension in the water, no resistance, just a natural unfolding. The water didn't try to force its way forward. It just allowed itself to be carried along by the stream. For a fleeting moment, Jinpa understood. The water's flow was a symbol of the very essence of peace. It wasn't about forcing the flow. It was about letting go and allowing the current to guide you. He sat there for hours, watching the water cascade over the rocks, trying to capture the feeling of ease that the water embodied. Why? He wondered. Could the water flow with such ease? While he struggled so fiercely in his own practice, what was he doing wrong? As the sun began to set, Jinpa realized that the water had something to teach him. It wasn't striving. It wasn't pushing. It wasn't trying to control its path. The water was surrendering, allowing nature to guide its journey. And yet, this realization, while profound, did not bring him the peace he so desperately craved. He understood the lesson of the water, but knowing it wasn't enough. He wanted to feel it. He longed for transformation, for a real, tangible shift in his being. Determined to apply the lesson, Jinpa threw himself back into his meditation practice with renewed vigor. He wanted results. He was tired of just observing nature. He wanted to experience that flow, that peace, for himself. He became more rigid in his practice, pushing his mind to focus even harder, forcing his breath to slow down, forcing his body to remain still. He was determined to rid himself of every distraction, to empty his mind completely. But despite his efforts, his mind grew even more unsettled. Every time he tried to suppress a thought, it grew louder. The harder he pushed, the more restless his thoughts became. The tension in his body deepened, and instead of achieving calm, he only became more agitated. Jinpa realized that in his desperation to reach peace, he was only intensifying the very struggle that kept him from it. He felt trapped in an endless cycle. The more he sought peace, the further it seemed to slip away. Jinpa's inner struggle grew stronger as the days passed, and soon, it seemed as if the harder he tried to control his practice, the more elusive peace became. He couldn't understand why. Despite his best efforts, his meditation felt like a constant battle rather than a serene journey. Frustrated, Jinpa retreated to his small, solitary cell and sat in silence, staring at the flickering candlelight. He had tried so hard, yet peace remained beyond his grasp. But it was in this moment of quiet despair that he realized something important. He wasn't allowing peace to come to him. He was forcing it, and that, perhaps, was the very thing that stood in his way. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden hue across the forest, Jinpa sat quietly under the vast canopy of ancient trees. Lost in thought, his mind was heavy with frustration, and his heart burdened with doubt. Despite his countless hours of meditation and effort, peace still eluded him. He wondered if he would ever truly understand the secret to stillness. As he sat there, deep in contemplation, his master, an elderly monk known for his quiet wisdom and serene presence, approached him. The master had been watching Jinpa struggle from afar and had observed the growing tension in his student's practice. He sat down beside him, silent for a moment, allowing the tranquility of the forest to wash over them both. Then, with a knowing look, the master spoke gently. "Jinpa," he said, "your mind is like a clenched fist. The more you tighten it, the more energy you waste, and the farther you move from your goal. Would you like to hear a story that might help you understand the art of letting go?" Jinpa, eager for any guidance that might help him unravel the mystery of his struggle, nodded earnestly. The master began the story. Once, there was a farmer who struggled with drought. His fields had not seen rain for months, and his crops were withering. Every day, he prayed for rain, dug trenches, and lamented his misfortune. He spent all his energy looking up at the sky, desperate for the rain to come. But despite his efforts, the fields remained barren, and the drought only seemed to grow worse. His desperation consumed him, and he could feel his spirit becoming as dry as the land he tended. The master paused, letting the imagery of the farmer's plight settle in Jinpa's mind. One day, a wise wanderer passed through the farmer's land. The master continued, seeing the farmer's distress. The wanderer said to him, "Stop chasing the rain, tend to the soil, nourish the seeds, and let the sky decide." The farmer, though skeptical, listened to the sage. He stopped obsessing over the rain, and instead, he focused all his efforts on enriching the earth. He fertilized the soil, tended to his crops, and gave his full attention to the present moment. He trusted that, in time, nature would do its part. The master paused again, looking directly at Jinpa. Unexpectedly, The rains came, the skies opened, and a gentle shower fell upon the land, bringing life to the soil. The crops flourished, and the farmer's fields became green and bountiful. Jinpa listened intently, his mind now fully absorbed in the story. Perplexed, the farmer approached the wanderer and asked, "Why did this happen? Why did the rains come only after I stopped chasing them?" The sage smiled, his eyes twinkling with the wisdom of ages, and replied, "When you stop grasping at the sky, you make room for miracles to happen." The master looked at Jinpa now, his gaze steady and filled with understanding. "Jinpa, you are like the farmer. You are chasing peace, trying to force it to come by tightening your grip on it. But peace cannot be forced. It can only emerge when you stop grasping for it. Tend to your practice, to the present moment, with sincerity, but without expecting any specific outcome. Stop fighting the current. Stop clenching your mind. The results will come, but not through force. Just as the farmer tended to his soil, you must tend to your mind with care and patience, and let peace unfold naturally." Jinpa sat in silence, absorbing the master's words. The weight of the lesson began to settle in. For so long, he had tried to force peace into his mind, expecting it to appear if he worked hard enough. But now, he understood that his efforts had only created more resistance, like the clenched fist that only tightens when you try to grasp something too hard. His tight grip on peace had only kept it further from him. He had been holding on too tightly, pushing too forcefully, and as a result, peace slipped further away. The master's words resonated in Jinpa's heart. When you stop grasping at the sky, you make room for miracles to happen. Perhaps, he thought, the true path to peace wasn't in trying harder, but in letting go, in surrendering to the flow of life and allowing peace to come when the time was right. Inspired by the master's story, Jinpa made the decision to embrace the path of non-attachment. He was determined to follow the master's advice and surrender to the natural flow of life, trusting that peace would come in its own time. But as soon as he began his practice with this new mindset, he quickly discovered that letting go was far more difficult than he had imagined. Each time he sat in meditation, he found his mind consumed by questions. Am I doing this right? When will I find peace? The very act of trying to let go seemed to create new tension within him. The expectations, the desire for results, were still tightly wound in his heart. He wrestled with them, day after day, as if trying to fight his own thoughts. Despite the master's wisdom, he felt restless. He wanted to experience the tranquility the master spoke of, but the more he focused on achieving it, the more it seemed to slip away. One afternoon, Jinpa sat beneath a tree in the temple garden, his gaze lost in the tranquility of the surroundings. The sun filtered through the leaves, casting dappled light across the ground. As he meditated, his attention shifted to a small movement near the base of the tree. A butterfly was struggling to free itself from its cocoon. The delicate creature wriggled and pushed, its wings twitching as it fought to break free. Jinpa's heart stirred with compassion. He watched, thinking of how much he wanted to help the butterfly, to ease its struggle. Perhaps if he just gave it a little help, it could break free more easily. But just as his hand moved toward the cocoon, he heard the voice of his master behind him. If you interfere, Jinpa, the butterfly will never gain the strength it needs to fly, the master said, his tone calm but firm. Let it struggle. It is through the struggle that transformation happens. Jinpa stopped in his tracks, his hand hovering above the struggling butterfly. He understood the words, but still, they didn't completely make sense to him. Why would struggle be necessary for transformation? Why couldn't the butterfly simply be helped along its way? The master continued, stepping closer and pointing to the butterfly's slow progress. The struggle is not an obstacle. It is the process of growth. If you take away the struggle, you take away the strength it needs to fly. In that moment, Jinpa felt a deep recognition stir within him. He saw the parallel to his own journey. Like the butterfly, he was in the midst of his own struggle. He had been trying so hard to force enlightenment, to rush the process, thinking that if he just exerted more effort, the results would come. But perhaps, just as the butterfly needed its struggle to emerge from the cocoon, Jinpa needed to let his own transformation unfold naturally. With this realization, Jinpa shifted his approach. He stopped trying so hard to meditate perfectly. Instead of focusing on achieving peace or forcing his mind to empty, he simply meditated to be present. He allowed his thoughts to come and go without judgment. He no longer measured himself against an ideal or imagined the results he thought he should be seeing. He allowed his practice to be imperfect, just as he was imperfect. At first, it seemed like nothing had changed. The same restlessness flickered at the edges of his mind. His thoughts still wandered, and his heart felt uncertain. Yet, with each meditation session, he found himself more willing to let go of his expectations. Gradually, the tension began to ease. His breath grew deeper and more relaxed. The tight grip of urgency softened, and his mind became quieter, more at ease. Over time, small shifts began to occur. Jinpa's body felt lighter, less burdened by the weight of his striving. His thoughts were less scattered, more focused on the present moment. He stopped trying to measure his progress, stopped seeking the validation of others or even his own inner standards. He simply sat in meditation, as still and effortless as the waterfall he had admired all those months ago. His thoughts flowed like the water over rocks, moving without resistance, without force. The more Jinpa practiced this non-attachment, the more he began to understand. The struggle wasn't something to avoid, but something to move through. It was through releasing his obsession with results that he made room for the peace he had been chasing. By surrendering his expectations, he began to align himself with the natural rhythm of his practice and of life itself. Slowly but surely, Jinpa discovered that peace had always been within him, just waiting to be uncovered. One day, as Jinpa meditated in the serene stillness of the forest, something extraordinary happened. The air around him seemed to grow thick with silence, as though the entire world had paused. A profound sense of stillness washed over him, filling every corner of his being. In that moment, it felt as though the forest itself had merged with his body and soul. The trees, the birds, the wind, everything was one with him. The boundaries between himself and the world dissolved. He felt as though he was no longer a separate being meditating, but the very life force of the forest itself. For the first time, Jinpa felt a deep, unshakable peace settle into his heart. It wasn't something he had to strive for or achieve. It was simply there, as natural as the breath he took. It was as though this peace had always been present, quietly waiting for him to recognize it. All along, he had been chasing something that was already within him, hidden beneath the layers of attachment and expectations. Jinpa realized that peace wasn't something he could force into his life. The harder he tried to grasp it, the further it slipped away, just like trying to hold water in a clenched fist. But when he had finally let go of the pressure to achieve peace, let go of the attachment to specific outcomes, peace emerged on its own, effortlessly, like the water flowing over the rocks in the stream. The realization was simple yet profound. Peace was never something to be acquired. It had always been there, waiting for him to stop searching for it and start embracing the present moment. He smiled inwardly, recognizing that in his pursuit of peace, he had been running in circles, trying to force something that could only be found through surrender. Later, when Jinpa shared his experience with the master, the elder monk smiled gently, his eyes filled with wisdom. "What you found," the master said, his voice soft, "is the fruit of non-attachment. When you stopped caring about the results, you cleared the space for peace to arise. You see, the journey is more important than the destination. By surrendering to the process, by trusting the flow of life, you align yourself with the natural rhythm of the universe." Jinpa nodded slowly, absorbing the depth of the master's words. Now, he understood the true meaning of what the master had been trying to teach him all along. Letting go wasn't about abandoning his practice or giving up on his search for enlightenment. It was about trusting that the universe would reveal its truths in its own time. It was about surrendering to the present moment and allowing peace to arise naturally, without effort. As Jinpa sat in meditation again, he no longer struggled to force his mind into stillness. Instead, He allowed his thoughts to come and go like passing clouds, watching them without attachment. His breath became deeper, more steady, and his heart felt light. He didn't need to measure his progress or worry about when peace would come. It was already here. All he had to do was let go and allow it to flow through him. In that surrender, he found freedom, the freedom to simply be, without the need to control or grasp at outcomes. And in that freedom, he found peace, exactly as it had always been, waiting for him to remember it. Jinpa's mind was still swirling with questions. But why does caring block the results? He asked his master, his voice filled with confusion and curiosity. He was beginning to sense that there was something more to his journey, something deeper than he had yet understood. The master, his eyes calm and wise, looked at Jinpa thoughtfully and replied, "Caring itself is not the issue. Jinpa, it is the attachment to a specific outcome that creates the tension. When you become fixated on a particular result, you create resistance. Imagine holding water in your hand. If you grip it tightly, it slips away. But if you cup your hands gently, the water stays. It is the same with life." Jinpa paused, considering the analogy. It made sense. Yet he was still struggling to understand how this applied to his own efforts. The master continued, his voice steady and reassuring. "Life flows in much the same way. You cannot force it. Jinpa, you must trust the process. If you remain open to whatever comes, without trying to control it or fix it in your mind, you will find that the results will come naturally, without any force." To further illuminate his point, the master shared another story, one that Jinpa could immediately relate to. "There was once an archer," the master began, "who was determined to perfect his aim. Every day, he practiced tirelessly, always focusing on hitting the bullseye. But despite all his efforts, his arrows would often miss. Frustrated, he sought advice from an old, wise archer who had seen his struggle from a distance. The older archer observed him for a while before saying, "Your problem is not that you are aiming too little. The problem is that you are aiming too hard. Relax your grip, steady your breath, and let the arrow fly without fear." Jinpa, intrigued by the story, listened intently. The master continued. The young archer was skeptical, but he decided to follow the old archer's advice. To his surprise, his aim improved drastically. The secret was not in trying harder, but in trusting his skill, releasing the pressure, and letting go of his obsession with the target. Jinpa looked up at the master, realization beginning to form. The master nodded, sensing his understanding. "Just like the young archer," the master said, "you have to trust in your own abilities. When you stop gripping too tightly, when you release the outcome, your mind becomes clear. Only then will your true skill, your true potential, come to the surface." Jinpa sat in silence, reflecting on the wisdom in his master's words. He had spent so much time trying to force peace, trying to force progress, but now he understood that in his pursuit, he had been creating resistance. True peace, true results, could only come when he relaxed his grip and allowed things to unfold naturally. Trusting the process, rather than clinging to a specific outcome, was the key to unlocking his true potential. 7. Letting go in daily life, 14 to 1600 hours. As Jinpa deepened his understanding of non-attachment, he began to integrate this wisdom into all areas of his life. He realized that letting go wasn't confined to his meditation practice. It was a way of being, a mindset he could apply to everything. One morning, as he worked in the temple garden, Jinpa no longer focused on the eventual blossoming of the flowers or the neatness of the rose. Instead, he found himself fully immersed in the joy of planting the seeds. He marveled at the feel of the soil beneath his fingers, the rhythm of his movements, and the quiet connection with the earth. His mind was no longer caught in the future, anticipating results, but rather in the present moment, savoring the act itself. When he taught the younger monks, he no longer fixated on whether they would succeed or fail. He no longer sought validation or the satisfaction of knowing they had learned quickly or perfectly. Instead, Jinpa poured his energy into simply guiding them with care, enjoying the process of teaching and sharing knowledge. The moment they asked a question, he was there, fully present, without any attachment to whether they understood everything immediately. At first, this shift felt strange. Jinpa had always been someone who measured success by results. But now, as he allowed himself to release his attachment to outcomes, he discovered something profound. He felt freer, no longer bound by the pressure to control every result. He found a deeper satisfaction in the present moment, the joy of teaching, the peace of tending the garden, the simple act of breathing. These were the things that brought him fulfillment now, not the imagined future rewards. The more Jinpa practiced letting go, the more he realized that it wasn't about giving up or abandoning effort. It was about fully engaging with the process, without being consumed by expectations. He discovered that letting go opened up a space for him to experience life in a way he never had before, with freedom, ease, and presence. Over time, the effects were subtle but undeniable. He no longer rushed through his tasks or wished for a different outcome. He found beauty in the small, everyday moments, the sound of birds in the trees, the feeling of a warm breeze on his skin, the simple act of sitting in silence. Letting go didn't mean detaching from life. It meant embracing it fully, without the need to force anything to happen. This shift in perspective brought Jinpa a sense of inner peace and fulfillment he had never known. No longer preoccupied with the end goal, he found that the journey itself had become rich with meaning. Each step, each breath, each moment, he was no longer waiting for peace to arrive in the future. It was already there, in the very act of living. One day, a young monk came to Jinpa seeking advice. "Master, I see how calm and peaceful you are now. How can I achieve the same peace? I try so hard, but it always seems just out of reach." Jinpa smiled gently and replied, "The harder you chase something, the more it eludes you. Trust the process. Young monk, focus on the present moment, not on some future goal. Like the farmer who stopped chasing the rain, tend to your inner soil. Cultivate patience and trust that the harvest will come in its own time." The young monk was still unsure, but he listened carefully, sensing the truth in Jinpa's words. There was a stillness in the air, a peace that seemed to emanate from the elder monk. The more he listened, the more he began to feel that there was something profound in this way of living, a way of being that didn't demand effort, but embraced simplicity and trust. Jinpa continued, "When we stop obsessing over the results, when we stop forcing things, we create space for life to unfold naturally. Like a seed growing in the soil, it doesn't rush to become a tree. It trusts the process of growth, step by step. It doesn't worry about becoming the tallest tree right away. It simply grows as it should, at its own pace." The young monk looked down at the ground, reflecting on these words. He had always believed that peace was something to be grasped, something that required relentless striving and control. But now, he wondered if peace was something that simply needed to be allowed to happen, like the steady growth of a seed into a tree. Jinpa's voice brought him back to the present. In the same way, you must trust your own growth. The more you try to force your practice, the more you block the peace you seek. But when you release that tension, when you trust the process, peace will come to you. The young monk's mind began to quiet. For the first time, he understood that the struggle itself was the barrier. Peace was not a goal to be achieved, but a state that would emerge when he let go of the need to control every aspect of his path. With this new understanding, the young monk felt a sense of relief. He no longer needed to force himself to attain peace. Instead, he could simply be present, trusting that, like a tree growing naturally from the earth, his peace would unfold in its own time. The key wasn't in the struggle, it was in the trust. One day, as the golden light of dawn filtered through the trees, a younger monk approached Jinpa with a question that had been weighing on his mind. "Master," he began hesitantly, "if letting go brings results, should we stop setting goals or striving for anything at all? Should we simply live without direction or purpose?" Jinpa smiled softly, sensing the doubt in the young monk's heart. He placed a hand on the monk's shoulder and replied, "Not at all, my friend. Goals are not the problem. They are like the stars in the night sky. They give us direction, help us chart a course, and remind us of where we wish to go. But remember, they are not destinations to be reached with force. The true path lies not in the goal itself, but in the journey and how we walk the path, step by step. The younger monk looked confused. So Jinpa continued, his voice steady and filled with the wisdom of experience. Letting go doesn't mean giving up or abandoning your dreams. It means loosening your grip on the outcome. It means letting go of the need to control how things will unfold and trusting that everything will happen in its own time. When we surrender our attachment to the results, we free ourselves from tension, and in that freedom, we become open to the flow of life. To help the young monk understand better, Jinpa used a metaphor. Life is like a dance, he said, his voice softening. If you focus only on the final step, the end of the dance, you miss the beauty of the movement. A dancer does not strive to finish the dance as quickly as possible, nor do they obsess over reaching the final position. Instead, they immerse themselves in the rhythm, feeling each step as it comes, trusting the flow of the music to guide them. The young monk listened intently, his brow furrowed in concentration. But master, he asked, if we don't focus on the goal, how will we know when we've arrived? Jinpa laughed gently. That's the beauty of it, he said. When you stop obsessing over the end, you experience the joy of the process itself. You stop rushing, and instead, you savor each moment. The results, the success, the peace, they will come naturally, like music finding its harmony. They will arise when you stop trying to force them and instead allow them to emerge on their own. He paused, looking into the young monk's eyes. The dance of life is not about finishing the steps. It's about being present with every movement, trusting the rhythm of your own heart, and allowing the flow of life to carry you forward. In that surrender, you will find that everything you seek has always been right there with you, in the present moment. The young monk remained silent, absorbing the depth of Jinpa's words. As he walked away, he felt a sense of clarity wash over him. It was as though a veil had been lifted, and he could see the dance of life more clearly now. Instead of obsessing over what was to come, he would allow himself to trust in the flow, to move with grace, and to savor each step along the way. He realized that in letting go, he was no longer bound by expectations. He was free to live fully in the present moment, and in doing so, he would naturally align with the results he sought. Over the years, Jinpa's teachings began to spread beyond the forest monastery. Monks and laypeople alike came to him, seeking guidance on how to let go of their struggles, overcome their fears, and trust the process of life. Jinpa welcomed them with open arms, knowing that his path was not one to be kept to himself, but shared with those who were ready to listen. One day, a new monk, filled with doubt and uncertainty, approached Jinpa and asked, "Master, how can I let go of something that matters so much to me? If I don't care, won't I fail to achieve it?" Jinpa listened patiently, understanding the young monk's inner turmoil. He replied with great compassion, "Letting go does not mean indifference. It does not mean that you stop caring. It means releasing attachment to the outcome. Caring deeply about something is beautiful. It shows your heart is open, your spirit is alive. But when your care turns into obsession, it binds you like chains. The more you cling to an outcome, the more you restrict your ability to grow, to move freely in life." The young monk was quiet, processing the words that had just been spoken. Jinpa continued, "You must trust your efforts, trust the process, and trust life's timing. Life is not a race, nor a battle to be won. Let go of the need to control everything. When you do, you will find that your actions flow more effortlessly, and in that flow, you will come closer to what you seek. It is in the release, not the grip, that you find your true strength." The young monk sat in silence, deeply reflecting on the wisdom of the master. For many days, he meditated on the meaning of these words. Slowly, he began to realize that he had been holding on too tightly to his expectations. He had mistaken attachment for passion, urgency for devotion. He now understood that true devotion meant trusting the process, even when the outcome was uncertain. In time, the young monk learned to let go of his attachment to results. He still worked hard, still cared deeply, but he no longer sought to control or force the outcome. His practice became more peaceful, more fluid, with patience and faith. He found the peace that had always been within him, waiting to be uncovered. Jinpa had learned this lesson long ago, and now he shared it with others. True freedom comes not from clinging to goals or expectations, but from releasing them. When you stop holding on so tightly, life opens up in ways you could never have imagined. Trust the process, trust your heart, and in that trust, miracles begin to unfold effortlessly. Jinpa knew that the key to a fulfilled life was in this delicate balance between effort and surrender, between caring deeply and letting go. And through his teachings, many found peace not in achieving their goals, but in the quiet, patient surrender to the flow of life itself. The teachings of Zen and Buddhism offer us profound wisdom. True peace and success are not found by relentlessly chasing the end result, but by learning to let go of our attachment to specific outcomes. When we release our need to control, we make room for the natural flow of life to unfold. The journey itself, with all its twists, turns, and lessons, is just as important, if not more so, than the destination we imagine. In a world that constantly pushes us to strive for more, faster, and harder, it's easy to forget that peace isn't something we can chase or force into existence. It's always present, waiting for us to surrender and align ourselves with its rhythm. So, take a deep breath, release the pressure, and embrace the present moment. Trust that the universe has its own perfect timing and that in due course, everything will fall into place as it's meant to. Let today's lesson guide you. Let go of the need to control and simply be. Be present, be patient, and most importantly, be open to life as it unfolds. In doing so, you will not only find peace, but you will also discover a deeper sense of fulfillment and joy. If you found this video helpful, please show your support by hitting the like button, sharing your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more mindful insights. Remember, the best way to live is with an open heart, a peaceful mind, and the willingness to let go.